this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back for another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have Degrowth, How to Make the World Poorer, Polluted, and Miserable from John Stossel on YouTube, and I posted that. And yeah, I definitely don't think that's very good how a lot of the eco-activists want to make the world degrowth. You know, they don't want growth. They want the world to be. They want to force the world to live by their standards, not let everyone live by their own standards. And I don't think that's very libertarian. You know, I think if people want to do degrowth by themselves, I think they should be able to. But I don't think they should force others to do so, especially when growth leads to stuff like, you know, better medical treatment or you know, more advanced technology and higher life expectancies, you know, stuff like that. Then we have revealed U.S. conservative think tanks links to extremist fraternal order from TheGuardian.com by Swamp Yankee Dan, and I didn't comment on that one, but, you know, ultimately, I do think, you know, anyone who dissents at all is increasingly going to be labeled as an extremist these days, and that's important to remember. And I definitely don't think, you know, people should be working with extremist fraternal orders, but ultimately, if they want to justify that, I think they should be able to, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have U.S. billionaire drowns in Tesla after rescuers struggle with car's strengthened glass from ibtimes.co.uk from Swamp Yankee Dan, and I said, I'm sure this wouldn't be posted to nearly 30 subreddits if it was a Ford. You know, the subtext here is going after Elon Musk, which is a popular narrative right now, not so if whoever owns Ford currently. You know, that's why I think that's why this is probably so popular on Reddit right now, because, you know, Tesla Man, that is really one of the big narratives right now. Also, I think it was Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law who was the billionaire, so I think that's interesting as well. Then we have CAA, India to enforce migrant law that excludes Muslims from BBC.com by Zachness. And I don't think that's good. You know, I think people should be able to travel wherever they want to, as long as they're not, you know, illegally entering, I would say. Even then, you know, ultimately, I think its borders should rather be enforced by individuals rather than forced collective state, and that's my thought on that issue. Then we have Boeing whistleblower John Barnett found dead from AlJazeera.com by Tequila Mockingbird. And I said, supposedly from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I'm thinking CIA or other alphabet agency. You know, since Boeing receives tons of government subsidies, they might as well be one and the same. And that's my thought on that issue. Then we have today's state troopers would bring Paul Revere's ride to a halt before it even started from LPPA, and I posted that. And I said another similar one they put out recently, and that's they said, like, YouTube would remove Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death Address. Ultimately, you know, I think the founding fathers, they would definitely be seen as terrorists today for going against the government. And ultimately, that's why I don't think you should be care if anyone labels you terrorist, traitor, or whatever, because they would label the founding fathers the exact same thing. And that's important to remember. You gotta stand up for yourself, and if anyone might throw a mean label at you, but that's okay. You can just take it and move on. And that's my thought on that issue. Then we have news, chaos, and gang violence in Haiti. My take, this highlights that anarchy is mainly an unachievable utopia, at least at the state level. Some group level likely always will try to seek control of society, from USAtoday.com by Freethinker78. And I said, I don't care for the cannibal gangs, but at least they aren't the state. Then we have Republicans streaming for dictatorship and their autocrat wannabe idol murdering his enemies from Clorox, and that's a crosspost from the Interesting as Fuck subreddit. And, yeah, I definitely don't think that's very good, but, you know, ultimately, I think everyone, Republican or Democrat, just kind of want a dictator they agree with, and that's increasingly becoming obvious, I think, as time moves on. They just want their person in power, and, you know, Democrats say they care about democracy, but, you know, ultimately, they just want to vote for Joe Biden no matter what. even if his opponent was the most moderate Republican imaginable, and that's my fault on that issue. Then we have Stone Toss got doxxed by Baton 13, and that's linked to a Twitter thread from an on-commie stan. Looks like it got removed. And he said, Baton 13, I'm not one to link to Zitter, nor am I one who advocates doxing. This is a special event. Please take time to read through the 99 post thread about Hans Christian Gramber and the absolute pestilence he's been on the internet, both as Red Panels and Stone Toss. And I said, it isn't very nice to dox people, especially for just making comics on the internet, but justify whatever you want to. Then we have Biden clinches Democratic nomination from the Hill, and I posted that, and I said, Trump will probably clinch later tonight or soon after, and he did end up clinching later that night, so that's my fault on that. It looks like it's going to be a Trump-Biden rematch again, and I don't think that's very good. I think it's ultimately why George Washington should have set a one-term precedent rather than the two-term one, that precedent that he did. Then we have Trump says pardoning Capitol attackers will be one of his first acts if elected again from TheGuardian.com by Clorox. And they added pardoning domestic terrorist loyalists. Nah, he's not that bad, folks. And I said he could have done it while he was president, but didn't. It's just a carrot and a stick he's using like the Dems with abortion or marijuana. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have former Belgian MP sentenced a year in jail and fined $16,000 over racist memes from Gript. And I posted that. And I said probably coming to the U.S. sooner rather than later, sadly. I think I was referring to people getting in prison for sharing memes, but I guess we already did have Douglas Mackey sharing the meme about text to vote for Hillary, and he's going to get to prison. So ultimately, I do think soon you won't be able to share any memes or anything that the censored off without risking imprisonment over it. I think the U.S. is slowly starting to play like China in that regard, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Hattie Roy on Gaza. Never again, and never is crossed out from Scroll.in by Frosty Slawman. And I definitely do think we need to support Gaza at this time and hope for a permanent ceasefire and as soon as possible. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have RFK Jr. remarks on Anne Frank vaccines draw condemnation from 2022 from APnews.com by Clorox, and I said, Clorox added, somehow I missed the portions of his position on anti-vaxxers having worse than exterminated Jews during the Holocaust until today. I said, I'm sure if he did it about the LGBT community instead, you would be fine with it. Ultimately, everyone thinks they have it the hardest time possible, but, ultimately, when it's the in-group, people will justify saying that. Well, it's the out-group, people will say, oh, that's just being hyperbolic, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have NHS England to stop prescribing puberty blockers from BBC.com by Doctor Who 07, and I said, I think if children want to take them, they should be able to, but I personally am against it since we don't know the long-term side effects of them. I don't think children should be taking them personally, but I'd say the same thing about them taking heroin. Ultimately, if a children wants to justify taking any drug they want to, that's ultimately on them and not me. And sadly, they may screw them up for life, but sadly that's how life is sometimes. It can screw you up, but that's how you just have to cope with it, I guess. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have The Importance of Both Sides, and that's by Tom 14. It's a Tom the Dancing Bug comic, and it's about two reporters in the New York Times who are rounded up and sent to the camps after Trump wins the elections. I said, LOL, I wish. I'm against mandatory camps, but outside of politicians and other government agents, the people who most deserve to be in them are alpha media journalists, though they kind of do fill the government agent label as well. I support free speech, I just don't care for propaganda, and that's undoubtedly what stuff like the New York Times, MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News is, and that's my thought on that issue. Then we have the NYPD sent a warrantless subpoena for a cop watcher's social media account, but won't defend it in court from HellgateNYC.com by Baton 13. And I definitely don't think that's very good, I would agree. Ultimately, that's why, you just can't have the cops just running around subpoenaing everyone or using the law to their advantage, and that's why I don't really care for the police or the legal system in that regard, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have House passes bill to force TikTok sale from Chinese owner or ban the app from Doctor Who 07, and that's a post from, it's an archive link to New York Times. And I said, I don't like TikTok, but I don't think we should give the government unilateral power to man websites and apps. It's only a matter of time before the U.S. starts to look like China in that regard. Especially since the U.S. government doesn't give a shit about the Constitution or Bill of Rights, and any dissent at all will probably be removed under this new policy. Then we have don't ban TikTok from LP Texas official. And that's a meme they shared, and it's the Knights of the Round Table circling around the table. It's all their swords, and it says, "Don't ban TikTok in center." And it's on the sides of people making bad content on TikTok, libertarians who make fun of bad content on TikTok, internet trolls, cat video makers, confused Joe Biden, normal people, everyone in Gen Z, independents, etc., etc. And I said, you really have to wonder if everyone's so united against it, how did it manage to pass the House by a vote of 352 to 65? And ultimately, that just goes to show you that the state is just going to justify whatever it wants to, and it's up to the people to resist, not the state to force that stuff down their throat. I personally don't care for TikTok, and I don't really care that the CCP owns it. But ultimately, if people want to use it, I think they should be able to, regardless of I wouldn't use TikTok, but if people want to use TikTok, they should be able to, regardless of who owns it. I would say, regardless if I would say the same thing if like Al Qaeda owned it or ISIS owned it. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have another aging authoritarian ruler to worry about. Putin is 71 years old, has no successor, no living rivals, no retirement plan. Why his eventual death will set off a vicious power struggle from theconversation.com by Tom Furtan. And that's not going to be good, I think. And that's why I think that's going to be very scary time in Russia, I would say. Almost even scarier than today if the absolute tyrant in power, and that is Putin. That's my thought on that issue. Then we have, it's called The American Dream because you have to be asleep to believe it, from, it's a YouTube video from Bob Alexander. It's of George Carlin elections, and that's proposed by Ragnar ROKXG. And I guess I would agree with Carlin there. The elections don't really matter. It's just changing the party and power from red to blue, and that's pretty much it. And that's my fault in that. The U.S. is still going to bomb the Middle East. There'll still be kids in cages. It doesn't really matter, and that's my thoughts there. Then we have breakdown of U.S. House vote to ban TikTok from Freethinker78 across posts they made from the free speech subreddit. And I definitely don't think that the vote was very good, but hopefully it doesn't pass the Senate, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have 5 other House Republicans could resign after Ken Buck from Newsweek.com by Swamp Yankee Dan. And I personally don't if they want to resign, I think they should be able to. With that being said, I think it might just be media hype, and that's my thoughts on that issue. And I think we're gonna wrap up there. I'll see you guys next episode. Bye.